I mean, we saw in July, the state failed, absolutely clearly, for days on end, people were looting and doing what they wanted, and there was no state, there was no army, there was no police. And you can't not believe in state failure when you've been through that. Now, I think that's the only way that you would get secession of the Cape or anything like that. That clearly, if the state was simply in such a powerless situation that it was unable to do anything to stop that, well, then obviously people who wanted to walk away would do so, and would, in a sense, be forced to do so because nobody else would be willing to take on the responsibilities of governance.
Hello, my name is Donald, and welcome to the #1 media company, WorldView. At WorldView, we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. Today, we're talking with R.V. Johnson. Bill is a British journalist, political scientist, and historian who resides in South Africa. He was educated at Natal University, Oxford University, and he is a Rhodes Scholar. Between 1995 and 2001, he was the director of the Helen Suzman Foundation, and he is currently a fellow of Magdalen College, Oxford, where he has taught for 26 years. Bill is the author of many books, such as How Long Will South Africa Survive?, Fighting for the Dream, and For a Native, an account of his life in Africa. Bill, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
So, Bill, we've just had a very historic local election result with the ANC for the first time falling below 50%. What is your opinion of this result? Was it a political earthquake?
I don't think so, no. It was part of a process of decline of the ANC vote. It just happened to go below the 50 mark this time, but it was a matter of time before that happened. The question, the decline seems to have accelerated. So the big question is, will this continue? And if it does at the same speed, then clearly the whole coherence and unity of that party is at stake. It was a very bad result. I think the key point really was that when I was doing opinion surveys for the last general election in 2019, we did try and test what sort of effect Ramaphosa had on the ANC vote. And we found that there were 11% of voters who were basically fed up with the ANC and didn't trust it, but who said they did have confidence in Ramaphosa and would therefore support the ANC. In other words, he was making that difference. It would have gone below 50 in that election, but for his personal effect. Now, it suggests that although he's still quite popular, that his ability to prop the party up has considerably diminished, and that that sort of special factor seems to have gone or be down to a very small level.
Why do you think that's the case, that he's managed to distance himself from his party, that he is more popular than his party? How does he achieve that?
Well, I think that it was true probably of all the presidents. We don't have comparable data for all of them. I'm sure it was true for Mandela, that he was more popular than the party, and I suspect it was for Mbeki. So I don't know about Zuma though, but certainly it's what I would expect, because the president is, the key personalities. He's in the forefront of one's imagination and all reporting and so forth. So he's a larger than life figure for most people, and they have opinions about him much more than they do about the party usually. So that, and this is well known in other presidential systems too. De Gaulle was always far more popular than the Gaullists and so forth. And very often it's been true in America. So that's not unusual in itself, but what one tends to find in such systems is that as a process of what sociologists call routinization takes place, so that over time, you know, that margin, which is the presidential margin, does tend to diminish because, after all, he's not a magic man, and he is identified with the successes and failures of the government at the end of the day. So the longer it goes on, the more he tends to, the two figures will come together. And that's certainly what's been happening here.
Well, that's fascinating. And I believe another interesting thing to watch will be the next ANC conference in 2022. Who do you believe will be elected as the deputy president there and eventually succeed Ramaphosa? What do you think will happen there?
Well, it's quite difficult to say because the current occupant, David Mabuza, doesn't really seem to be much of a prospect. He's got a reputation as a crook. There are even books showing that he was and possibly still is a crook. And his health hasn't been very good. And there seems to be discontent with him as a deputy president, even inside the ANC. So I think there's a general supposition that they'll have to come up with somebody different. Now, I think that would have been Zweli Mkhize, because for fairly obvious reasons, it would be useful to have a Zulu, particularly if the central presidential office is having continuous trouble with KwaZulu-Natal, which it looks like it will while Zuma's still around. So it would be good to have a heavyweight Zulu who, like Zweli, had been premier of the province and had a following of his own. But he has messed that up because of the Digital Vibes affair, which in that sense, I think, you know, he was well positioned otherwise. He'd been quite good as far as the electorate was concerned over the COVID. And they liked the idea that he was a qualified doctor and he had a certain gravitas. But by the Digital Vibes affair, it's very strange because quite clearly his family benefited from that, particularly his son. And in a sense, he seems to have chosen to steal a bit now rather than wait until becoming president when he could have stolen a lot more. So he sort of seems to have really knocked himself out of the reckoning. So I suppose that the most likely person after that is Paul Mashatile, because he's known to be ambitious. He would be young enough to do so. He's already Treasurer General, one of the top 6. But there's a problem, which is if you look at it, all the presidents to date have had some sort of struggle record. Mandela, obviously, Mbeki in the exiled ANC, Zuma in MK and exile, and Ramaphosa even as a trade unionist and UDF leader. And we would now go, in other words, into completely new territory, somebody who has got no struggle record to speak of at all, and who therefore doesn't have any national profile. I mean, the others, if you think of it, all the presidents we've had to date were famous men before 1994. We've been using up that, the ANC has failed to renew itself. It's been relying on the people who were famous before 94, and it's now running out of those. And I'm not sure how well Mashatile could do in this role because he's really only known in Gauteng. He's a Shangaan, which is not a very large group, and has some of the same problems as being a vendor, which Ramaphosa has. I mean, it's quite obvious that, you know, if you know KwaZulu-Natal, you know that Zulus will never take very kindly to being ruled by a vendor. It's just a big problem. And
why is that?
Well, it goes all the way back to, I mean, if you ask Zulu people about that, they'll go into things about what happened in the time of Shaka and say the vendor would run away if the Zulu MPs came and this sort of thing. Literally, they would make remarks like that. So, I mean, I think that is a problem, and I suspect that it's affected Ramaphosa's self-confidence, and it's why he dithers and is indecisive and so forth. I think he knows that he doesn't have the I mean, look, the dominant group in this country are the Nguni people, Zulu Xhosa, and in a sense, it's easier if the president comes from that group. but we've now stepped outside that group with Ramaphosa, and if it were Mashatile, we'd do it again.
That's interesting. What do you think of the chances of a person like Tandi Modise, the former Speaker of the House, the current Minister of Defense, a woman? She has a struggle record. Don't you think perhaps Ramaphosa elevated her to the position of Minister of Defense to get her into the position of Deputy President?
Well, it's possible, but I hadn't thought of it truthfully. Look, the ANC has been very much a male preserve always. There's never been a woman leader picked. So all I can say is it would be very, very new territory if they really did go that way. I would be surprised.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting experiment because many of their voters are conservative. But if we can pivot to a very interesting article you wrote about the Freedom Front Plus, you said that a lot of English white South Africans love the idea or are very interested in the ideas of the Freedom Front Plus, which are federalism, Cape independence, conservatism, but they are not comfortable voting for the party because it has that sort of national party brand, affiliate brand. What do you think the Freedom Front Plus can do to get over that? Or can you explain what you wrote in that article?
Well, I take it when you say English white, you mean English speaking, not actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Equally, there's no such thing as a National Party affiliate because the National Party doesn't exist, but it hasn't done for 20 odd years. But I take it, I understand what you're saying. Well, look, I think that what I was saying about that is that a lot of English-speaking whites in South Africa, and I mean, I think that they're particularly prominent in the sort of Cape independence movement. They're rather apolitical people or non-political people, and they probably would have been United Party in the old days. And I think the problem is that the Freedom Front, rather like Solidarity and AfriForum, put themselves forward very much in an Afrikaans way. And quite clearly, the feeling is there, one, that the Afrikaans nation is threatened, as it was after the Anglo-Boer War, and that they've really got to stand together to get through this trial, which they are now undergoing. And to that extent, it's deliberate. I mean, there are a lot of English speakers who are sympathetic, particularly to Solidarity AfriForum, and rather admire it. But AfriForum and Solidarity always behave as if that's not of much interest to them, you know, and they're far more willing to take up the cause of Afrikaans-speaking colored people than white English speakers. But obviously, if they did decide, and the Freedom Front decided that they wanted to go that route, then they would need some English speakers in their leadership. And at the moment, there aren't such people. Mind you, having said that, after I wrote that article, I was quite struck by the fact that a number of English-speaking whites that I came across made the point that that wouldn't stop them supporting them, that they had a good opinion of them and so forth. And one has to keep one's eye on that because we live in an age of racial polarization. It's a very unfortunate fact, but it's true that the more this government fails, the more you get white people reverting to sort of primary racist attitudes, saying Africans are hopeless, always will be, etc., etc. I mean, I see it all the time, and it's very unfortunate because those attitudes were very common in the apartheid era, but they then vanished in the new South Africa during the Rainbow Nation phase, and everyone was much relieved, I think, and it was genuinely progress that we got beyond those sort of attitudes. So it's rather disappointing to see them back again. But it's, I think, you know, the sheer failure of the ANC government and the failure of the economy and all the things that go with that are exerting great pressure on people, and this is how they respond.
So it can be as simple as just getting more English-speaking South Africans into your party.
if that's what they want. As I say, I'm not sure that they want it, but if they do, that's what they would need to do. They'd have to have some prominent English speakers in their leadership.